I do believe strongly we'll see another rate cut there it's the 29th, I believe, when we get the data point or get the official decision. Good afternoon and happy Thursday. We have a few more delays in some of the data due to the government shutdown, but we will cover the housing data here recently and also give a bit of a preview for the Fed meeting coming up here just already next week. I'm Brandon Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue, and our goal is to leave you feeling more empowered after every interaction. And every Thursday, we bring to you this quick update just to share some of the data, the trends, and the news stories that we're watching, but certainly helping to weed out some of the noise along the way as well. And this week, a little bit lighter on the data side yet again, because of the government shutdown and how that translates to data being either slowed down or withheld at the moment. I shouldn't say withheld. It's not withheld, just not being produced at the moment. But what I do want to touch on briefly is some housing data. So before I share that, actually, just briefly, what is delayed at the moment is housing starts, building permits, and leading economic indicators. Those were all data points that we were hoping to cover here today, but they were delayed due to that government shutdown. So the biggest one to cover for this week, looking backwards, is existing home sales. Existing home sales came out today, and it jumped up quite a bit now to about 4.06 million. This may not be much of a surprise, actually. This will tie a lot to what I'm going to cover here in the Fed conversation. But, one of the challenges has been the housing market, and primarily because of the higher rates. We came off of this very, very, very low interest rate environment with mortgages, and we went to a higher, although not too high. If you go back to the 70s or 80s, this is really nothing compared to what we've seen in the past, but nonetheless, a higher interest rate environment. And when we are at basically zero, to go to where we stand now still is significant. Same borrowed amount of money at 3% versus 6% really makes a huge difference. And so as a result of that, I think that's what we've seen in terms of slower home sales. A lot of people not wanting to leave their current very, very low mortgage rates to buy another. And so that's kind of led to some of this. Now, it depends where you look. Here in the Pacific Northwest, the housing market hasn't been impacted all that much, quite frankly. It's been slower, but the prices have not been impacted all that much. But across the country, a little bit of a different story depending on where you're looking. So before we get to our question of the week, which is going to be the main topic here today, be sure to tune in next week. Next week, we are supposed to get CPI data tomorrow. So hopefully that'll help, and new home sales as well. And then next Wednesday, we're already back somehow to the Fed decision. It feels like we just got the last one, but the Fed meeting and decision there next Wednesday, which is very timely because if we do hopefully get the CPI inflation data tomorrow, that will give us a bit of an idea of what could come there Wednesday. But what I do want to share for our question of the week is really a preview of what to maybe expect next week for the Fed decision, even without that CPI data. So I think that generally, first off, I'll share that this should not be delayed due to some of the government shutdown. So we actually should be able to cover this next week. But what I will share is that I think it's very, very likely that we see another rate cut in that meeting next week. Probably not a surprise to many. Most of the market is already pricing that is going to be the case. The reason I share this is that the Fed last conversation when they started this rate cut path in September had shared that they kind of communicated a path of cuts through the end of the year. And often when they communicate that, in fact, he even said this, when they communicate that path, it's very difficult for them to go back against that because it can really upset the markets, essentially. So he had communicated that directly. Actually, he said something almost exactly to that point. And so as a result of that, I do believe strongly we'll see another rate cut there it's the 29th, I believe, when we get the data point or get the official decision. So that is the big thing to watch there. Now, that said, the only thing that might have changed that is the CPI data point. So again, we will hopefully get this tomorrow, but I will share it's not very likely, even if that number is really high, even one higher print may not necessarily change their stance for this meeting in particular. It may change how they communicate what's to come, but I think in general, even if that CPI data point is higher, which is very unlikely, at least to that extreme, it probably wouldn't change the path anyway, or at least not the decision for that next meeting. So we will continue to keep an eye on this. Of course, be sure to tune in next Thursday because we will cover exactly what the decision was and ultimately talk a little bit about what was discussed in the press conference that follows. But just as a quick glimpse, we do believe we're likely to see a 25 basis point rate cut there next Wednesday. For those following at home, maybe in how this translates to the housing market, just know that a lot of this is already priced in. It still might move rates a bit, but generally speaking, just because the Fed cuts doesn't mean that it directly correlates to a decrease in mortgage rates. Or credit cards and things like that too. So keep an eye on that. But again, a lot of this has been priced in because of how clearly Fed Chair Powell had suggested that they were likely to cut in this coming meeting as well as the December one. But what I think is really important to watch is what comes out of that December one as well and what they communicate for 2026. So we'll keep you updated on the Fed meetings as they come. Be sure to tune in next Thursday where we will cover the end of October one, and then we only have one more before the end of the year. In the meantime, have a great upcoming weekend, and we will see you next Thursday at 3.